Hey everybody, Scott Shetler here from Extreme Performance Training Systems in Atlanta, Georgia, and welcome to this week's episode of Strength and Health TV. I wanted to apologize for kind of being off the grid for the last few weeks. I've had a big kind of issue going on with my internet provider here at the training center. I had to, long story short, I had to switch from the provider I was using because they merged with another company and were no longer going to be offering their services. So I went with a company that I use at home. I don't want to give their name away, but their name starts with an A and ends with a T. And they made it near impossible to get internet set up here at my place of business, which kind of sucks. So we're going on almost 30 days without internet. Fortunately, I was recommended what seems to be like an awesome wireless service. My device should be here next week, so I should be up and running after 30 days without it. Thanks again to that massive company starting with an A and ending with a T. But anyway, we're back on track here, so we should have more episodes coming out regularly. I got a pretty cool topic today that I wanted to get into, and then we're also going to get into the next few weeks some more episodes where we look at exercise technique correction and where we look at different aspects of the training and fitness programs. So today I want to talk about this awesome book that I recently read. This is called Underground Secrets to Faster Running, Breakthrough Training for Breakaway Running by Barry Ross. This book was recommended to me by Louie Simmons from Westside Barbell Club when one of my athletes and I were visiting this past August. He said it was a great book and that I should check it out if I work with athletes, and it was a very, very great book. It's a very fast read, but it is dense with tons of great training information. One of the things one of the reasons I want to talk about it is I work with a lot of athletes, and I have worked with even more in the past. And one of the things that you see, especially when you're talking about this notion of sport-specific training, is that there's just a lot of lunacy passing itself off as good training recommendations out there. And one of the things that I liked about this book is it gets to kind of the core or the root of how to make an athlete run faster. Now, this book specifically deals with track and field athletes because that's who Barry had worked with and that's what his experience was with. But I think a lot of the principles that are presented in this book can apply to athletes across the board. And you'll pick that up a little bit as I get into this. Now, I took a lot of notes. I don't want to give away everything in the book, but there's some key points that I want to talk about. So I apologize. I apologize. I'm going to be doing a little bit of reading here. And I kind of hate that, but I want to make sure that the information that I share is accurate. So in a nutshell, you know, like I said, the reason that I really enjoyed this book is I think there's a big problem in the sport-specific training industry nowadays, and I think, you know, you see some pretty crazy training methods being passed off as, you know, good actual training programming and training methodology. And I think one of the things that's overlooked is just getting athletes strong. Looking at the general physical preparation of athletes, making them strong all over, improving their strength and power without putting on unnecessary muscle mass, you know, while keeping them in the desired, you know, weights for their sports, for their positions within a sport and such. And those are some of the things that the book talks about. In a nutshell, what this book is saying is that adding strength is necessary for improving speed, while adding unnecessary muscle mass is not and is actually detrimental. And that's a concept that Barry refers to as mass-specific force, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But the book starts out talking about, actually there's a few studies that are pointed to in the book, and the first one that he points to took place in 2000. This is a study by Peter Weyand, a PhD, who's a physiologist and a biomechanist. And this study was presented through Harvard's Journal of Applied Physiology. The name of the study was Faster Top Running Speeds Are Achieved with Greater Ground Forces, Not More Rapid Leg Movements. And basically what the study showed was that greater force applied to the ground rather than a shorter minimum swing time, which is the amount of time that the foot is not in contact with the ground, is what enabled humans to increase their top speed. And so basically, you know, what they're saying here is that the more force that the runner can apply into the ground every time their foot contacts the ground, the faster that they're going to go. It's got nothing to do with stride length or stride frequency. So that was a very, I thought that was a very interesting study, and the way to increase, the force output is, one, to get stronger with the basic foundational exercises, things like, squats and deadlifts, and actually Barry's a big fan of the deadlift. He feels that that's probably the most beneficial exercise for runners to perform, and he's got his reasons, which he talks about in the book. I talked a minute ago about how adding extra mass is not beneficial and can actually be detrimental. That's one of the things that comes up in the book, and he talks about this concept of mass-specific force. Basically, the problem with extra mass is that there's the more mass that an athlete has, the greater gravitational pull there is. So they have to, you have to consider that not only is the athlete sprinting or running, that they have to move that mass over the desired length that they're traveling. So extra mass is not beneficial due to the extra gravitational pull. What Barry refers to as mass-specific force is the amount of force that the athlete can produce in relation to body weight. He calls it mass-specific force, or MSF. Because of gravity, it is not just the amount of force applied to the ground, it's the amount of force in relation to body weight, is his comment on mass-specific force. The example that he gives is, when you think about this, obviously a super heavyweight weightlifter or a super heavyweight powerlifter can produce a greater amount of force than, say, a 170-pound athlete, 170-pound sprinter, or something like that. But the example that Barry uses in the book is, if you take a 400-pound man who's able to generate 700 pounds of force, he will not be as fast as a 170-pound man able to generate 500 pounds of force. So if you break it down, the 400-pound athlete is producing 1.7 times body weight in force against the ground, whereas the 170-pound man is producing 2.94 times his body weight against the ground. So the smaller mass producing a greater amount of force is going to move faster. The big guy can't keep up from the start, and eventually he'll run out of gas trying to propel all that mass, across the distance that they're racing. So again, a big super heavyweight lifter or a strong guy can produce more force, it's not going to be as beneficial as having less mass producing a greater amount of force in relation to their body weight. So I think this is one of the problems in the sports preparation industry is, when you bring up the notion of getting athletes stronger, a lot of these coaches who don't know any better, the first thing they think about is, they think about some big, massive super heavyweight powerlifter or weightlifter who's got a lot of extra body fat on their body, and they're just huge because they're going to be able to lift the greatest amount of weight, and that's not the case. When you talk about strength in relation to body weight, it makes a lot more sense that the stronger and more powerful that we develop an athlete while maintaining appropriate levels of body mass, they're going to be able to be more explosive and to perform better, or you're creating the opportunity for the athlete to perform better. Is this for sprinters only? No, there was another study that he points to in the book. This is pretty interesting. This was done in 1999 by Lena, and I'll probably mess up the name here, Pavlonainen. Lena published this study, Explosive Strength Training Improves 5-kilometer running time by improving running economy and muscle power. So basically what they did here is they had their control group and their experimental group. I think there was 8 or 10 people in the control group and 8 or 10 people in the experimental group. With no statistical difference between the experimental and control groups 5K times, the experimental group in this study reduced their running workout time by 32%. So their training time that they dedicate to running, they reduced it by 32%, and they replaced it with an explosive strength training routine to make up for that time. So that they actually trained running less, 32% less, and they devoted that time to a strength and power training program. So after 9 weeks, the control group showed no improvement in their 5K time, while the experimental group that reduced their running training time by 32% and added the strength and power training program, they showed a statistically significant time reduction. So ultimately, increasing ground force through added muscle power decreased the ground contact time in distance running just as it does in sprinting. And that's an important point to consider. So a lot of people would probably agree that sprinting and power athletes definitely need to spend some time getting stronger, but it'd be a waste of time for endurance athletes. And this study shows actually the opposite, that endurance athletes benefited tremendously from adding a strength and power training program. How big of an impact is all this? According to the weigh-in study, an athlete able to deliver additional ground force of only 1/10 of their body weight, so only 1/10 of their body weight additional ground force, would realize an increase in max speed of 1 full meter per second. So that's huge. So by increasing their ground force by only 1/10 of their body weight, they can have a max speed increase of 1 full meter per second. That's pretty massive. So ultimately, greater strength improves running economy since less energy is required to move the athlete's mass. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what the book is about. Barry gets into it much deeper. He talks about the studies more in depth. He talks about the science behind this more in depth. He really puts a lot of emphasis on the physics behind all this. And then he also spends a lot of time talking about basic exercises, what he feels are the best exercises for training runners, for getting them stronger, getting more powerful. He talks about plyometrics, when the appropriate time to add them into the training program is, and then he also gives sample training plans and things like that. And that's a pretty extensive part of the book, and there's a lot of great training information in there. So that's one of the things that I really liked about this book, was that not only does he discuss why this stuff's important, but he gives a lot of examples of training programs as well. A lot of times you read these books that they talk a lot about theory, or they talk a lot about ideas or science and stuff like that, but they don't give a lot of examples of training. And Barry certainly presents a lot of great information in here. I definitely, again, Underground Secrets to Faster Running by Barry Ross, fantastic book. I can't recommend it enough. If you work with athletes, if you're an athlete, it will really help you realize why it's important to spend a decent amount of time building strength, building power from a general physical preparation standpoint. So hopefully you'll like this week's episode. Again, it's a fantastic book by Barry Ross. I can't recommend it highly enough. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of information on why it's important for us to train athletes from just general physical training standpoint of strength development, power development, and how this enhances their ability to perform as an athlete. And hopefully it'll give you some things to think about, as well as question a lot of what's being passed off as accepted methodology in the sports preparation world. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. It's definitely great to be back to doing the Strength and Health TV episodes, and we'll be checking in again next week with a new episode. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you get updates on future episodes as they come out. And if you've got any questions about today's episode, or if you've got any suggestions for future topics, make sure you leave them in the comments below the video here, and I'll definitely make sure to put a link to the Amazon link to where you can grab Barry's book for yourself and check it out. It's definitely money well spent. It's definitely a great book to have on your bookshelf. And until next week, see you later. Stay strong and stay healthy.